Good morning. Welcome, everyone, to the Humanists of Greater Portland. And I told you to turn your cell phones. Okay. Welcome to everyone on Zoom and here. Okay. HGP believes strongly in freedom of speech, but the views expressed by myself, our reader, today's speaker, HGP members, and our guests at today's meeting are not the official views of the Humanists of Greater Portland. And Jeff is standing by. He's going to be our reader today. Jeff Strang.
So this reading is from some song lyrics by Arrested Development. This is from the album 3 Years, 5 Months, and 2 Days in the Life of Arrested Development from 1992. And this is called Fishin' for Religion by Speech, otherwise known as Todd Thomas. Grab the hook, grab the line, grab the bait, grab the box and wait. Tackle and shackle the topic the faculty has chosen. Chosen by many, chosen by plenty, chosen by any, man or woman who can understand the topic that's known, and go by the dock, flock and clock the topic, as I drop my hook and get a bite. The reason I'm fishing for a new religion is my church makes me fall to sleep. They're praising a God that watches you weep and doesn't want you to do a damn thing about it. When they want change, the preacher says, shout it. Does shouting bring about the change? I doubt it. All shouting does is make you lose your voice. So on the dock, I sit in silence, staring at a sea that's full of violence, scared to put my line in that water, 'cause it seems like no religion in there. Namely, so I give it another go, sitting in church, hearing legitimate woes. Pastor tells the lady it'll be all right. Just pray so you can see the pearly gates so white. The lady prays and prays, prays, prays. It's everlasting. There's nothing wrong with praying. It's what she's asking. She's asking the Lord to let her cope so one day she can see the golden ropes. What you pray for God will give to be able to cope in this world we live. The word cope and the word change is directly opposite, not the same. She should have been praying to change her woes, but pastor said pray to cope with those. The government is happy with most Baptist churches because they don't do a damn thing to try to nurture brothers and sisters in the revolution. Baptist teaches dying is the only solution. Passiveness causes others to pass us by. I throw my line till I've made my decision. Until then, I'm still fishing for religion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Now, who we are. Humanism is an approach to life based on reason and our common humanity, recognizing that moral values are properly founded on human nature and experience alone. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Portland's social safety net is more profoundly compromised than ever, with no accountability for the compounding trauma and wastefulness. Paul Susi will draw from over 25 years of experience in nonprofits attempting to address this slow motion humanitarian disaster, sharing insights, experiences, and a template for positive action. Please welcome Paul Susi.
Thank you, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Thank you for this warm introduction. I'm really excited and honored to be here. My name is Paul Susi. I use he, him pronouns. I am a Portland native. I'm the son of Filipino immigrants, born and raised right here in Portland, Oregon. In fact, I went to grade school just about 8 blocks that way at Cathedral Elementary. I was an altar boy at the cathedral for 7 years, so I'm a recovering Catholic. I also do a lot of work. I'm currently the director of the vendor program for Street Roots, which is the best paper on the West Coast, in my opinion. It's not saying a lot, but it's a weekly investigative, holding, very good. It's a weekly investigative award newspaper sold by folks experiencing poverty and homelessness here in Portland. They buy the paper at $0.25 a pop and they sell it for $1 or more. They keep all the proceeds. They're independent contractors. They get to set their terms of success for themselves. They don't need to present an ID. They don't need to present proof of citizenship or any of that. So it's a low barrier income source. If you're just getting released from prison, if you've lost your ID documents, you don't have a lot of options for something like that. So, and about half of our folks, I should say, are housed. They're housed in subsidized housing. They're disabled or they're retired. They are not making enough in food stamps or in pensions to put food on their tables. And the community of Street Roots is a really powerful thing. So they get fellowship, they get friendship. I'm officiating at a wedding next week of 2 vendors who met while being vendors. So I think the intersections with an organization like this are really apparent, right? Like we live in a loneliness epidemic in the midst of all of our other epidemics.
Fiamma just said rear.
So I really
said rear.
Ooh, hello?
A-R-E.
That's okay.
What?
So all of which is just to say that I do have a lot of intersections with this organization, with Greater Humanists. I am also a conversation project facilitator for Oregon Humanities. I am a peer resource navigator for Portland Street Medicine. And I wanted to talk particularly today about my activism. I am the sole volunteer for PDX ID assistance. This is my own sort of grassroots, quasi-vigilante social work. I am helping people replace lost IDs and birth certificates. For anyone who has experienced any of these barriers, back up. Pre-pandemic, I was a homeless shelter manager for about 5 years. I ran 6 different shelters over my time with transition projects. And I would see that the most common insurmountable obstacle for folks in shelter was that they had lost their ID or their birth certificate. And you can't get a job without an ID. Increasingly, you can't access healthcare, behavioral supports, substance use supports, case management, veterans benefits. And now more and more property managers are insisting on seeing a birth certificate as well as your ID. I don't know if that's legal. That's just what's happening on the streets. So if you've lost your ID and it's valid, it hasn't expired yet, you should be able to just go to the DMV. The worker will see your picture in the computer and they will just print out a new one for you for the $40 fee. If you're experiencing homelessness, you're more likely to be met with, well, I need to see a credit card. I need to see a lease document. I need to see your car title registration. All of these things that a lot of folks on the streets do not have. It's a way to say no, right? Also, it's $40. That's not nothing. And if you've never had an organ ID before, they're going to say, I need to see your birth certificate. How many of us know where our birth certificates are, right? If you weren't born in Oregon, there's a pretty good chance that you need a notary to notarize a replacement birth certificate application from your home state or territory. And it's a different fee for the different states. In California, it's a different fee for every different county. So the shelters never budgeted for this. The city doesn't think about this. The county doesn't think about this. Our elected leadership have never had this difficulty of being challenged to prove you are who you say you are at the DMV, right? Or at your hospital or at your veterans benefits social work, right? So of course they don't budget for this. And so I would watch people in my shelters. People would spend pre-pandemic, people would spend about 2 years between making the decision, okay, I'm on the streets right now. I need to change my life. I need to get clean and sober. I need to reconnect with my family. I need to make amends, get a job, save first and last in a deposit, right? Do all of the things, whatever your barriers are. On average, it was about 2 years. I would liken that to a 2-year commute on a 4-lane highway. It should have been 12 lanes, but our social safety net before the pandemic was about a 4-lane highway. It's a metaphor. And 2 years between making the decision, getting on that on-ramp, to getting to your destination, which is housing. Pandemic happens, the highway shut down, everybody stacks up on that on-ramp, and then suddenly all of Portland is going, where did all these people come from? All these tents, all these sleeping bags, all of this trash on the streets. They weren't here just yesterday. This must be brand new. They must be shipping them in. They must be coming out of the woodwork. Well, the highway was shut down. People aren't moving through the pipeline. And now, post-pandemic, we've got 1 lane open, right? We've spent all of this money to reopen all of these programs, and then we've switched back a few times, right? We've decriminalized and then criminalized, and then we've created all of these outreach programs and then defunded all of them again. We've created all of these overnight shelters, but we're closing all of these 24-hour shelters, and we never had enough case managers, and we never had enough housing at the end of the highway either. So now it looks like progress because we've taken away all their tents and thrown them in the garbage, but we've also taken away all of their prescriptions, all of their birth certificates, all of their IDs. Some of them have been replaced multiple times by me, right? And every time someone's things are swept, they're losing all of those puzzle pieces that they need. Which is all a big roundabout way of me saying, so my activism, my piece of resistance is, I have a notary commission in Multnomah County. I have a small bank account that I save money that I would otherwise spend on scotch or cigars. And I am just writing checks directly to the DMV or to the Office of Vital Statistics of the home state. I show up 3 times a month at 3 predetermined locations. I put that on my website. Caseworkers, people who used to work for me at these shelters, they know to look at my website and send their hard cases to me, the people that they can't get an ID replacement for. There are now some ID replacement programs in these different organizations, but of course, they're poorly funded, they're poorly staffed, and I don't know any social services agencies that employ notaries. All of the notaries I know work for banks or lawyers. And a homeless person is not going to be able to get a bank or a lawyer to notarize their birth certificate for them. I've written about 1,600 checks in 4 years. I've probably spent about $22,000 in 4 years. That's mostly my money, but that's also people who come to like experimental theater things that I do and contribute to the program. I'm not a 501c3. I'm not able to do tax write-offs. I don't want to be on the federal government's radar, right? I don't, there's all kinds of, and it costs as much to administer a program as it does to directly help people. So I'm avoiding that headache and I'm going out of pocket. I do think that this is inspiring though, because number one, I'm not spending $22,000 on scotch. Number two, I'm doing something with my rage. I think it's really important as human beings that we give due regard to all of the feelings. Not just the generosity, the care, the compassion, the joy. Those are all incredibly important, and we don't get to experience enough of that. But also, we need to call it like we see it. We need to say, this is wrong, this is unacceptable, and someone should do something about it. And if someone isn't doing something about it, what can I do within the limits of my own self, right? Like, none of us are superheroes. None of us are gonna ride in on a white horse and save the day. We're just individual people, or we're just individual communities. And that is incredibly powerful. There's a lot that can happen there. I believe very passionately in the power of community because it's not directed by a dictator. It's not serving some, antiquated religious point of view, right? We're just in service of our own consciences. And there's power and authority in that. And we've got to serve our conscience. You've got to serve your conscience. Do things as you see it, feel what you feel. I'm going to read a little bit from a memoir I just published in October called Character Work by Perfect Day Publishing, a local independent publisher. Came out in October. I've had readings at Powell's and at Broadway Books and a few other places. And it was reviewed very, very nicely in the Willamette Week recently. So I'm pretty proud of it. Years ago, I was working at a transitional housing program for paroled juvenile sex offenders, young men who'd committed their offenses when they were minors. They had served their sentences. They have undergone therapeutic treatment. They were now preparing to re-enter society. My manager, John, was a perpetually exasperated, exhausted man who looked at you with watery, skeptical eyes. His job was impossible. Ultimately, he would determine whether any of the young men in the program would get to try their chances in the world or would be remanded to custody. His decisions hinged on whether someone's explanations of themselves, their actions, their mistakes, their progress in therapy, their attempts at restitution, their potential for sexual employment, if any of this, for successful employment, if any of this was credible in his slow blinking eyes. His wife had recently given birth, so his eyes were always sleep deprived. He'd noticed that I was reading a novel during my downtime at my post, and one day he asked if it was any good. I don't remember what book I was reading at the time, but I do remember recommending it to him. I asked him if he liked books. No, he said, not anymore. I have no taste for them, none. I said, I don't believe you. I insisted he must have some favorite books or authors. I used to, he said, rubbing his eyes. But I stopped liking books. One day I realized it's stories. It's all just stories. I'm so freaking tired of all these freaking stories. Since January of 2022, I've been volunteering in different communities in my hometown of Portland, helping unhoused and impoverished individuals replace their lost IDs. I guide these people through filling out the forms. I give them advice on how to source other proof of identification documents, such as by registering to vote or helping them obtain a replacement birth certificate. When someone lacks the funds, I've been paying their fees. I hold a notary public commission in Multnomah County, and I use this to issue documents verifying people's identities so that out-of-state jurisdictions can issue them the birth certificate or the tribal identity card that they need. I call this small mutual aid project PDX ID Assistance. I am its founder and only volunteer. Caseworkers and community members spread the word about my events, so there's usually a small crowd of people seeking my help. I take care to say that I'm not a case manager I'm not an employee of the organizations that host me. I make a point of helping whoever shows up with whatever identity documentation they're seeking. I write personal checks directly to the DMV or to state offices of vital statistics. I began this project after spending several years as a homeless shelter manager. In Portland, most service providers can issue fee waivers allowing a person to replace their lost ID at the DMV with a declaration of homelessness waiver. But that doesn't help if a person's identity can't be corroborated with other documents, a health insurance card, voter registration card, law enforcement or medical paperwork, or passport. These waivers are also limited to 2 uses, after which a person needs to wait 8 years before they can access the waiver again, regardless of how many times they've been robbed or swept by city contractors, or they lose everything to fire or flood or some other personal calamity. I've known people who have been trapped in this Kafkaesque limbo for years. One afternoon, I meet up with a man named Simon in a tiny house shelter, which is little more than a shiny-looking gardening shed upgraded with a window and a space heater, one of dozens in a fenced-in property. This is the latest of several city-sanctioned sites for tiny house shelter spaces. This one operated by a mysterious nonprofit from California with an Illuminati-esque logo, part of a half-baked initiative from City Hall that during one of their periodic moments of remembering that they need to do more to help the unhoused. Simon is wearing sweatpants and a dark hoodie, damp from today's unexpected rain. He tells me that he has an ID from Washington, but it's expired. I learned that he was born in Arizona, a state that requires a notarization to complete the application for a birth certificate and a money order instead of a personal check for payment. I help him complete that paperwork. As we fill in the blanks, I can't help but get to know him a little bit. I don't personally want to. Neither do I want to be rude. But the questions on the forms have a way of releasing stories that I immediately try to forget. I intentionally try to forget. I know I have too many stories already. Simon's answers to the form's questions, however, lead to more details that lead to more stories, like the little cascading rock falls that dislodge the larger rocks along the eroding cliffs above the ocean. The form asks things like, what hospital were you born in? What is your parents' name before marriage? What's their birth date? Name the city and the state where your parent was born. And you try to answer those questions, and before you know it, you're talking about what it's like where you're from and how you've never believed in astrological signs neither. And soon you'll find yourself looking up the spellings of obscure towns and forgotten corners of faraway states. What did it take for your parents to end up here? When was last time you celebrated your dead mother's birthday? What was it like to grow up so close or so far from where you were born? How and why did you leave that place that you left behind? Sometimes the answers to those questions are just more questions, disguising themselves in different clothes. I interrupt Simon to tell him I need to go to a post office or a Fred Meyer to purchase the money order so that he can send this to Arizona along with the notarized application. It'll take me some time. I'll need to return on another day. He stops and stares at me. He'd forgotten what we were doing together. He was lost in his memories of these earlier times. I watch his shoulders sag as his awareness returns to this little gardening shelter and his damp hoodie and the drumming rain outside. When I return with the money order 3 days later, Simon is no longer on site. Staff aren't able to tell me whether he's permanently left or if he's been expelled for some behavioral cause, or if he's just simply out for the day. but I surmise from their tone and body language that he's no longer with the program. I contemplate sending the completed and notarized application and money order anyway. So, but then I would have to use the shelter as the return address. And I don't know whether the valuable birth certificate would be safely returned and received at this program or not. I don't know the staff. I don't trust the staff. And I don't know what Simon would want me to do. Those are the risks of this project. By not mapping out guidelines and rules to anticipate every scenario, I'm inviting moments like this. I risk violating Simon's privacy by causing a valuable document to wind up sitting in a drawer in someone's program desk, and that he might have parted with the program on bad terms. But simply shredding the notarized application and liquidating the money order also feels like ignoring Simon's wishes. Either way, I have to make decisions for Simon without his blessing. I should have begun by saying I apologize in advance for what my partner calls my Baroque tangents. I tend to go down rabbit holes. So that's my conversational style. It's also my writing style. So thank you for bearing with me. But this is actually a really good segue to, so I'm a social work guy. I'm an activist guy. And I'm also a theater guy and a writer. The theater work that I do was all about, originally it was because as the son of immigrants, my mom didn't want me to have an accent, so she wouldn't let me learn Tagalog or any of the Filipino dialects because she didn't want me to speak with an accent. I took that instruction and went to a very far extreme. I trained as a Shakespearean actor at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. And I'm very proud of that training. Shakespeare saved my life. Shakespeare is amazing. Shakespeare is extraordinary. Poetry is extraordinary. And the deep lesson that I learned from theater is that I'm not in charge of what I feel, but I'm in charge of what I do with those feelings. A script of any kind, poetry of any kind, is a chart of those feelings. But the reader, the interpreter, the performer, you are interpreting those feelings with action that is unique to your moment in time. And it's unique to your perspective and your experiences. And that's incredibly empowering for a young person to get that lesson when you're feeling all of the hormones and all the rage and the family trauma and the religious trauma and the social pressures, right? I still get to choose what to do with these feelings. And I can see the impact of positive choices. And I can work out my rage issues by playing Shakespeare villains. You get to play with swords. It's great. The most impactful piece of that work for me recently has been, I've been touring an adaptation of the Iliad to prisons. I did about almost 40, 45 performances all over Oregon, Wisconsin, Vermont, and Maine from about 2018 to 2024. So 6 years of the Trojan War. The work in prisons, actually, I'll just do this extemporaneously. I don't need to read from it. Please buy my book, but I'm not going to read from it. I'm just going to tell the story. The Iliad works in prisons because it's dead white guy culture. The administrator's not even going to read the script. They're going to say, oh, it's Homer, come on in. And so it's me, and it's a cellist, and it's a stage manager. The cellist is playing live music alongside me performing this script. It's an adaptation of the Iliad by Dennis O'Hare and Lisa Peterson. It's a wonderful adaptation. It's about hour and a half, right? And for the first 20 minutes, nobody really knows what's going on. It's just like, it's a way to pass the time. Guys are filling into the space. men, either adults in custody, men or women, and depending on the prison. They're just filing into the space and they're killing time. 20 minutes goes by and it's like fish in an aquarium, right? Nobody's really connecting. But slowly they start listening. They hear the music fill in. And then by the end of that hour and a half, we're an instant community. We're united by our common shared experiences and memories of trauma and violence that are called out and referenced by the Iliad. The Iliad, I believe, was written by someone who did horrible things and had horrible things happen to them in war and didn't know what to do about it. So they wrote it all down, or they started performing it as a poem. And that is now about 3,000 years old. That tradition of storytelling and of sharing and of connecting is about 3,000 years old. And it makes no sense as a text because it's like, you know, all of these incredibly descriptive and detailed descriptions that then get suddenly profoundly graphically violent, but then doesn't ignore the fact that there is a human being through all of this. These are human beings. These are full humans with families, with children or with lovers or parents that they left behind, that they were expecting to go home to. And it cost them something to be here, but it was what they needed to do. And then they died. And there's an impossible, I'm spoiling the ending of the Iliad. There's an impossible moment of grace at the end of this 24-book poem, where Priam, the grieving father, whose last son has been killed by Achilles, the greatest warrior of all time, whose lover had been killed, who will never get to go home again. These two men who have every reason to hate each other for what they have done to each other. They see each other grieving for their loved ones, and they experience a kind of love for each other as well, a kind of grace. It still doesn't end well. Troy still falls. Everybody still dies. But they get to choose to let go of their rage in that moment that they see each other and how much they share in their loss and in their longing for the people that they lost. That experience in a prison today is what we've been trying to do with touring in Iliad, what I've been trying to do in touring in Iliad. And that task, that impossible deed of connecting across, right? This is a room of, I don't know, 40 people, 50 people, vastly different experiences, vastly different life stories, but we're able to recognize each other's common humanity, even just a little fraction of that in this fleeting interaction we're having. That is the whole point of live theater. You don't get that in a movie. You don't even get that in a novel or in a poem, as wonderful as those things are. You get that by sitting in space live, and maybe a little bit by Zoom, but mostly by sitting in a space that you're sharing in real time together. That's why theater is so important to me. And those different dimensions of social work, activism, and theater, none of those things work on their own. They need each other for me to make my life make sense and for me to be able to face each day. And so what I'm trying to communicate here is that it's possible for every human being in this room to identify those similar dimensions of your lives, where they're interdependent in ways and they're independent of each other in different ways. They're insulated from each other in different ways. I can't rely on theater for my rent or my healthcare. I can't rely on my social work for artistic expression and connection across those boundaries, those professional boundaries that you need to have. I can't rely on my activism alone for rent or connection across the boundaries, right? But together, in tandem, those three dimensions work together to make my life bearable. So I'm really very selfish. I'm really just trying to get through the day. and pay my rent and have enough money to feed my cat all at the same time, right? And still be able to look myself in the mirror every day. And I think that is a through line for hope in this moment in time. There's so much that we can't control. There's so much that is beyond our budgets. There's so much that's beyond our abilities. But if you break them down into constituent pieces that make sense for the life that you are leading right now, you can be able to lead a life of integrity and effectiveness and care and connection. That's my motivational speaker piece, right? I wanted to, yeah, that's about the right time. I wanted to save a little bit of time if that's all right for any questions or any comments that folks wanted to make. I wanted to welcome that at this time, if that's all right.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Possible. If any of us wanted to assist you in your work, what would that look like?
Yeah. Great question. I do have a Venmo that you could just send money to if that's your jam. But I want to say, my dream is if every library, every Multnomah County library had a volunteer come into their library space like once a month. At the Northwest Library, I'll be there from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, and I'll just help whoever shows up replace their ID, right? That's all it needs to be. You don't need to like create a caseload and, you know, get grants or anything like that. If you keep showing up over time, people will start coming to you for help. You get to determine the boundaries of how much help you're able to give. That is my first piece of advice. My second piece is that if you absolutely wanted to give away money, I'll take your money and I'll use it to pay for the birth certificates. I help about 100 people a month right now at the different spaces that I go to. About 20 of those checks are never cashed out of those hundreds, right? So it really is, you know, it's chaotic on the streets. There's also lots of great organizations, Portland Street Medicine, Blanchet House, Street Roots. There's a lot of people doing direct care and mutual aid. You don't need to create a program. You can just plug into the communities that are already all around us. That's my advice. Yeah.
A space where you list your schedule where you are
Yes.
showing up. That way we can reference it.
Yes. www.paulsusi, PAULSUSI.wordpress.com.
Hi, this is Kurt Mackey. My question is there any way to connect your activism with city government to make documentation easier for the homeless?
Yes, great question. I'll be very candid. I am a very angry human being. I know I'm laughing and smiling, but I am very angry. And this activism is what is keeping me from punching the mayor in the face. So I really don't want to. I've tried writing letters. I've written for Oregon Humanities magazine. I've been interviewed on Think Out Loud. I've written a book, right? I feel like I've done everything I constructively can short of yelling in City Hall, which a lot of people are yelling right now in City Hall. So nobody's able to hear each other. So my feeling personally is that I'm not the right guy to have a rational conversation with elected leaders right now. I encourage others to, I mean, I'm a brown person in a white supremacist city. They're not even gonna let me, they're not gonna hear me. So I'm not gonna waste their time or my time. But I encourage people to talk about this with your electeds or your personal connections, to talk about these issues in a human way, because directly speaking, saying you should do this, it just invites more resistance and opposition from the billionaires. But if they hear it socially, or if they, think about it in a contemplative way, in a reflective way, where they're having these conversations off of work hours, there's a stronger likelihood that people will start to understand the enormity of these obstacles. So that's why I'm trying to communicate it in this way, kind of indirectly. So if you know the mayor, please tell the mayor.
Thanks. Got a couple of people on Zoom that didn't get your address or your website, and they want me to plug it in again. Can you give that to me?
Of course. www.paulsusi, PAULSUSI.wordpress, WORDPRESS.com.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We have 7 questions. Okay, I guess we're on number 1 or 2. 1. Okay.
I'm working on a 2028 ballot initiative for the state of Oregon that would give every resident dividend of about $1,000 a year, like the Alaska Permanent Fund. The way it's structured now is it would put it on an Oregon trail card, which receives the SNAP benefits.
That's right.
As an ID expert, what would you recommend that dividend benefit go to for homeless?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Yeah, I think putting it directly on the OTC card is brilliant because that's an existing infrastructure. And you don't need to, you don't need to create a whole other program for that. The Oregon Trail Card does have restrictions on what the monies in that program can be used for, but harm reduction, that's better than nothing. $1,000 a year is a drop in the bucket, but it's also not nothing either. And I love that the general principle of people know what they need best for themselves. People have autonomy and independence and authority over their lives. I love that that initiative is honoring that principle. Of course, we all know and have experienced on the streets of Portland individuals, housed or not, who probably should not be in charge of their own lives. They probably should not have the freedoms that they enjoy, and they are not experiencing the consequences that our social contract is supposed to impose on them for walking into traffic or for blowing through a stop sign or whatever, right? So that's where it gets real crunchy and real sticky real quickly. But I think moving in that direction is a beautiful thing. And I think we have to keep showing up for each other in order to build the trust that is necessary for a broken social contract to be repaired. So I support that. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, question 2.
I'm new here. I wanted to ask you, when you said $22,000 over 4 years, and then very shortly after that said not a 501c3, I found that terrifying, but also intriguing.
Yeah.
And I want to know, both as a mathy person, like, what are the numbers like? Are you facing just horrific tax implications for that? Do you have liability fears? But also as a burgeoning mutual aid person, like, can I do that too, please?
Yeah, great questions. Yes, so the tax implications are, I'm treating whatever, I'll just be candid because whatever. I'm treating whoever donates to this project as a personal gift, not as a contributing to an organizational expense. I'm treating the expense as just me buying a thing. So I'm not reporting that as a business activity. I do have a notary public commission that requires me to keep specific records of what I'm notarizing and for whom. But that commission is protected by the laws as much as they can be from investigation, right? You need a special court order to look at a notary's records. And the notary commission stays with you. So even if you were told by your boss that you need to be a notary, that if you leave that organization that you got, say you got it at Wells Fargo, if you left Wells Fargo, you take your notary book and your rubber stamp with you. It stays with you under lock and key. It's your personal charge, your personal responsibility. So there's a lot of autonomy there. At the beginning of this project, I consulted with some lawyers about this, and they told me it would take about $4,000 to form a 501c3, purchase errors and omissions liability insurance, create all of the infrastructure that an organization would need to create. Just before I even started helping a person, I would have to spend at least $4,000, and recruit a board of directors, and So those are all the reasons why I chose not to. It's 4,000 reasons not to. I'm not a wealthy person. All of my day jobs have been in social services. It was only since the pandemic years that I feel like I've had the disposable income to devote to this. So yeah, 22,000 is a lot. I'll be candid, I make probably 56, 57K a year as the director of the Street Roots vendor program. So, it's not a lot of money, but I don't have children. I don't have a mortgage. I never went to college, so I don't have student loan debt. So supposedly I'm winning at capitalism right now. So yeah, and it's I probably still spend significantly more on alcohol and tobacco anyway. So, it is a judgment call, and I'm not trying to guilt trip anybody or say that you have to, perform at a certain level. No, you're making a choice to help people, and you have authority over that choice. That success can look like what it needs to look like for you and your circumstances. Yeah.
Question number 3.
I spent 2 years trying to get my elderly mother ID after her. It expired in Buffalo, New York, and I was an abysmal failure. How did you learn to do it and be successful at getting people?
Yeah.
That is a
Well, if you
Trick is that this is where the professional boundaries are a tool. I'm not as emotionally invested as if it was my family member. And the no that you get, like when you're on hold and you're like passed from bureaucrat to bureaucrat to bureaucrat, you pay one fee and then there's another fee. Like I would take all of that personally, and I would just get angrier and angrier and angrier. But because I'm able to say, this is how it works. I'll help you if you show up. I'll write the check. I'll fill out the paperwork with you. I can't guarantee if the bureaucrat is going to help you, but we're going to send this to New York. And it's something about that attitude and that approach. I have a higher likelihood of success because I'm not allowing myself to get emotionally invested in a way that I would be if it was my family member. That's why these programs need to exist. You need to have the ability to detach and set those boundaries really clearly. And once you treat the bureaucrats with boundaries, they treat you with a regard and a respect that is actually a lot more effective than if you were emotionally honest and engaged with them and then frustrated and you get into opposition. So it's a weird kung fu, and they don't teach that in Masters of Social Work programs. But there's a knack to that, and once you get into that, it becomes like Tai Chi. Do you have a follow-up?
my mother, who was in East Aurora 60 years. The bank knew her by name as she walked in the door.
Of course.
Could not cash a check at that bank without an ID, even though everyone knew who she was.
It's insane.
She died with, if she had been, she voted, but if she had needed ID to vote, my mother would not have been able to vote. She would have been denied the right to vote.
That's right.
And
That's
it
right.
drove me crazy.
That's right. Yeah, it's
insane, it's unjust, it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And I'll say this about voting in Oregon. If you get the little postcard, the postcard application to register to vote, as it currently exists right now, it might change with all the federal nonsense, but as it currently exists, you can go to any Multnomah County library, get that little postcard, register to vote. You don't need to send a proof of anything. You just need to know the last four of your social security number, write that in the postcard. You'll get a voter registration card. I'm not telling you to vote for anybody. I'm not endorsing any parties. You'll get that postcard back as a voter registration card, and that is a form of alternative proof of identity. That's really important and valuable to have. Keep that alongside your birth certificate if you have it, so that if and when you get into a situation where you need to replace your lost driver's license or ID, you bring those items to the DMV, and that will force them to say yes to you. Right? Voter registration card is just as important for your identity as it is for a sacred civic right and responsibility that we all have. So thank you for bringing that up. Number 4.
Thank you for your presentation today. I'd like to think that I'm an advocate for homeless folks. One of the things that interests me the most is street routes in the South. I'm curious about how many you publish each week, how many are sold each week, and I'm also very interested in a resource book that you produced a while back. I looked at it. Every homeless guy needs to have one of these.
Exactly. Yeah.
How are those programs doing?
Yeah. Great questions. We are now
publishing a circulation run of 6,400 papers a week, where we've sold out consistently every week for the last 5 weeks. That's partly because we've had such an extraordinarily mild winter. Very nice weather means that our folks are selling more papers, which is great for our people. It's awful for the snowpack, but you know, it is what it is. We are now officially back at pre-pandemic circulation numbers. We have over 400 vendors at any given time. So that's people who are consistently buying papers and selling them. We have roughly 400 right now. Many, many thousands of people over the years have gotten out of homelessness through being a vendor at street routes. There's many folks who are housed and who have other income streams, but as I was saying before, they really love the sense of community that Street Roots provides for them. They have regular customers at their coffee shop, and they want to say hi every day, and they want to sell a paper every day, and we publish their poetry and their art as well. The Street Roots, the Rose City Resource Guide, we publish that twice a year. Every 6 months, we update it. It is the most comprehensive source of information, not just for homelessness resources, but mental health, domestic violence, rental assistance, food pantries, all of those things for the Tri-County area, Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties. It's absolutely free. We publish we print like 160,000 copies of this thing every 6 months. It is far more reliable than 211 or 311. In fact, those operators rely on our resource guides to do their jobs when it should be the other way around. We're doing local government's work for them. Street Roots has a brand new building on 3rd and Burnside that we moved into in October of 24. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard being on 3rd and Burnside. We're right at the epicenter of a lot of trauma every day. And it's people who want their small businesses to survive, and people who are tired of stepping over trash and human waste. And I'm responding to a medical emergency at least once a week. I'm Narcanning someone, or I'm doing CPR once a week. So it's hard. It's hard, but it's a beautiful paper, and it's 35 years. It's yeah. Yeah. Vendors come to us to our offices on 3rd and Burnside. They buy it for a quarter a piece and sell it for $1 or more. That $1 price has been the same since the first Bush administration. So I encourage people to have positive, respectful conversations with their customers. The vendor keeps all the tips, right? And new paper comes out every Wednesday morning. Yeah. We do have a little subscription service. It's a little key, but like basically you connect with a vendor and say, I'm going to buy 20 papers from you every week. I can give you $20 a week. Street Roots will send the paper to you by mail. Yeah, you can sign up for that. It's a little wonky though, because there's a lot of, vendors, we encourage them to have regular spots that they go to. Sometimes they're not always there. Life happens. So, yeah.
We have another question from the Zoom people. Hank Robb asks, could you say some more about how your theater training helped you contact that sense of personal agency?
Oh,
by which I mean that sense, no matter what I feel and think, I still get to choose what I do with my hands, arms, feet, and mouth.
Totally. I'll tell y'all a story that is not in the book. I had a crush on a girl. She was my best friend freshman year of high school. I followed her into an audition for the Pirates of Penzance. She was cast as a cop. I was cast as a pirate. So the first play I ever did was the Pirates of Penzance. And it was a great way to, high school happened, that relationship went nowhere. But it was in doing that work in collaboration, in a team with a whole bunch of other people doing a play. And some of us were really talented, some of us very much were not. But we were all like wrestling with how do we make the play work? How do we make the scene work? How do we learn the choreography in the right way? And that adrenaline, that the rush of feeling romantic and feeling excited, that's what hooked me in. And then as I continued to do theater through high school and then as a young adult, I learned more about the poetry of specifically Shakespeare. I learned how the rhythm of language is a through line through unbearable feelings. The ways that syllables, that sounds connect and live in your body. You're able to say the word with feeling. I recently did a production of The Winter's Tale. I played Leontes, who's a terrible tyrant who accuses his queen of adultery and sentences her to death. And it's one of Shakespeare's problem plays because it's very magical realist. She turns into a statue and then she comes back to life at the end. No one knows how to make that work on stage. But the opening monologue for this king who turns on a dime from being incredibly loving and happy to, oh my God, my wife is betraying me. That speech begins with, too hot, too hot. I have the tremor cordis on me. My heart dances, but not for joy, not joy. This entertainment may a free face put on, derived from liberty, from bounty, from fertile bosom, and yet seem so, but to be paddling palms and pinching fingers as even now they are. Oh, to mingle friendship far is mingling bloods. Right? There's a tangle of language in there that doesn't make linear sense. But when you imbue each syllable with feeling, the feeling and the meaning flows through you, so that now what was inside you that you were wrestling with on something completely unrelated is now alchemized and transmuted into something purposeful for the purposes of performance and gets out of you. So instead of, I don't know, doing something destructive and doing something negative, I'm taking those feelings, I'm repackaging them using the gloss of Shakespeare and poetry, and I'm putting it into something for public good, something that allows all of us to perhaps reflect on what it is to be unreasonably jealous, what it is to be convinced of a lie, and to know it deep down that it's a lie, but you're still acting on it as if it's true, right? That complexity is why I still do theater. It's not linear. I don't walk out of it feeling, now I'm healed. No. But it helps me understand what I'm feeling even as an adult.
I hope this doesn't bring up a touch of all that anger, but I would like to know, what is the first thing you would recommend that the mayor do? And what is the second?
Yeah, the first thing I would recommend the mayor to do is to get
away. Just get out of the way. There's so many programs that are being destroyed by the mayor's initiatives, either intentionally or unintentionally. Of course, I'm messing up. Yeah, the first thing I would say is get out of the way. The second thing I would say is that, like, understand that we're not all in the same timeline, right? Like, the mayor thinks that if I just open a shelter, that everything will be better. And I keep responding with anecdotes. I apologize, but it's the real. I knew a guy in my shelters for about 3 years. I would see him every 6 months. This guy, early 40s, white, skinny, strong, scrawny and skinny, and stringy brown hair. Really mellow and soft-spoken, really kind for 2 weeks. And then night 15, every time he came into one of my programs, night 15, he would be screaming and yelling, picking fights with other people, throwing over tables. And it would be my job in the morning to say, Jerry, you know what's going to happen. I have to exclude you from my program for 6 months. And, you know, we care about you. Like, we want you to be successful, but these are the guidelines we have to follow in the shelter. And there has to be a consequence for this. I'm so sorry, Paul. I won't let it happen again. I'll do better. This would repeat for 3 years. Come to find out, Jerry had 20 years ago aged out of Oregon's foster care system. He had been horribly abused. He had been running away from the service providers who had hurt him. And every case manager who had inherited his case over those 20 years, parole officers, judges, doctors, lawyers, were all looking for him because he had a golden ticket. He had healthcare, he had a group home placement, he had a church community, he had an extended family community. Lots of people with lots of resources were looking for Jerry to help him, but he kept running away from them because someone in their positions had abused him. For 20 years, he had been running. And he called whoever had inherited the case had called me, found out that he was in my program and called me. And I said to Jerry, I will break the rules of my own program. I'll drive you to this appointment. You don't have to sign anything. You don't have to go into the facility, but just sit through the intake. I'll be right here beside you. And if you don't want to go, that's totally fine. I'll drive you back to the shelter. And it took me breaking my own organization's rules for him to check himself in that day. Next thing I know, 6 months later, he's completely unrecognizable. He's a completely different human being. He's medicated, he's connected with his church group, and he's got a group home, and he's donating meals to my shelter. And I didn't even recognize him, right? But he needed to run away for 20 years. The mayor can't just create a program that can help someone like Jerry, who's not ready to be helped. The systems have betrayed him repeatedly, and it required a relationship of trust that was earned. And you can't do that overnight, no matter how much money you have or what amazing program you have. It's going to take a diversity of programs over a diversity of timelines. To reach Jerry, I had to have started 20 years ago, right? My program had to actually exist for Jerry to come and develop a relationship of trust with me over 3 years. So grasping that you can't just throw money at it, you can't just pass a law, you can't just build a house and expect everything to be better, right? You can't just build an apartment building and expect everything to be better. We have to connect over time with each other, and everybody's on a different timeline. I don't get to know if a person is in act 1 of their play or act 3 of their play or act 5 of their play. That is their life story. And I'm not in charge of the outcome. That's the hardest thing. I can never be in charge of somebody else's outcome. So that's the second thing I would say to the mayor.
Okay, question number 6.
This problem that you're dealing with of people not having no ID, what is the extent of that being caused by interactions with law enforcement or the justice system? People working in those systems think that society would be better if this person did not have an ID when they were out of custody, etc.
That's right. Well, it's particularly for adults in custody who are being released and their ID expired while they were incarcerated. You talk to corrections people and they say it's not our job to make sure that this person has a viable ID upon release. Our job is to protect the public from this person. So they don't want to get into the business of figuring this out. Now, there's a case to be made for, you're preventing recidivism by giving people the legal and valid means to be employed again legitimately, right? But, that's a complicated conversation to have with someone who's...
Destroying IDs.
Yes. I can't speak to intentional.
But yes, what's happening is when a person's tent is being swept, either by law enforcement, most often by Rapid Response, which is a private contractor that the city contracts with, they're supposed to identify essential property and store that for 2 months. But in practice, these workers, many of whom are formerly incarcerated, many of whom are formerly homeless, they believe that tough love is the best medicine. So they're going to treat people poorly because they think that having strong consequences will discourage people from being homeless in the first place, as if poverty or substance use or, any of the circumstances, job loss, right? As if all of that was avoidable in some way, right? So what they're doing is they're throwing away people's medications. They're throwing away people's birth certificates, employment documents, hospital paperwork. They're throwing it away. They don't want to deal with the paperwork themselves of recording it for what it is and storing it appropriately. And half the time, like the storage facility is inaccessible. It's not connectable by public transit. It's somewhere in North Portland in a warehouse. People don't know how to get to it. And so then once it's there, it goes from there to a dumpster. So there's a lot of waste in the system. Yeah. And intentional, yeah, I would say that that's intentional, but it's just deniable enough for contractors and law enforcement to say, well, I didn't intend for this to go to a dumpster. That's just what the process is.
We have one last question from Zoom. David Gray asks, please tell us again from which country your parents immigrated to the U.S. and is the name Susi associated with that ethnicity?
Yeah, great question. I was told actually that Susi in Finnish means wolf. I can't imagine that I have any Finnish blood in me, but a wolf is pretty cool. My parents immigrated from the Philippines. My mom was a nurse at Good Sam for 20 years here in Portland. My father, my father is on his fourth marriage and lives in McMinnville now. Has a nice car and 2 golden retrievers and is living the American dream. But my father was a refugee from the first Marcos regime. Ferdinand Marcos was the dictator of the Philippines until 1986. And my father was active in student government. He was like his college student body secretary. And one night he got the message that everybody was being rounded up. And he and his best friend in Manila, Charlie, I write about this in the book, he and his best friend Charlie, they were saying, you know, maybe we should go hide in the countryside with my father's family. And Charlie says, no, I'm going to stay in Manila. I have family in Manila. I'll be fine. My father goes to the countryside. Charlie gets arrested and imprisoned for 20 years. My father forges a student visa to PSU. He comes over in 79. By 81, he's met my mom. She already had her citizenship. They got married, had me. When I was born, my mom wanted to name me Jonathan, which is a nice biblical name. My dad was like, let's give him another name. Let's name him Paul Jonathan, like the Pope, and it'll be nice. And my mom was like, great. But up until the first grade, I went by Jonathan. In 1986, my father is by then a manager at First Interstate Bank. This is all public record, so I'm not. He's arrested for embezzling about $10,000 from the bank. And my mom goes bankrupt getting the best lawyer in Portland to defend him, only to find out that my father's pleading guilty. The money all went to bribing Filipino customs officials to getting the rest of my aunts and uncles out of the Philippines. And it comes out in the trial that my father's already married in the Philippines and that I have an elder half brother whose name is Jonathan. So from that moment on, my mother said, we're calling you Paul. I didn't find out this story until many years later, but like, yeah, so that's my father's story from getting over from the Philippines. And my father went back after the fall of the Marcos regime to meet up with his friends, and Charlie had been released from prison. And my father was like, I'm so sorry, I want to help you. How can I help you? And Charlie, like, before shutting the door in my father's face, Charlie said, like, you should have helped me more. You should have convinced me not to stay in Manila. Then I could have had a life like you. And he shuts the door in my father's face. And that's the reality of dictators. And now the son of the dictator is the president of the Philippines again, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And they are revising their history. They're looking back at it. It's like MAGA Philippines edition. They're saying like, oh, the Marcos years were just, it was all fake news. The dictatorship is just fake news. It was actually a golden age. And so it's not just us. It's all over the world. Dictatorship is everywhere. But there's hope.
I think there's hope because of people like you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.